Today we are continuing in a sermon series. Is this thing, it's okay. I don't need to be any louder. I'm already loud enough. Sermon series exploring the new vision statement of the United Methodist Church. If you didn't know, now you do. At 12 months ago, the United Methodist bishops put out a new vision statement for our denomination, and it's better to be late than never. And so we're now kind of exploring it and kind of learning what it means. Let me read it to you in case you haven't heard it yet. The United Methodist Church forms disciples of Jesus Christ who, empowered by the Holy Spirit, love boldly, serve joyfully, and lead courageously in local communities and worldwide connections. And as I've said in the last few weeks, what catches my attention about this statement is not only the verbs it uses, love, serve, and lead. Those are great, good biblical words, but this vision statement doesn't leave them alone. It gives them a way of being. Love boldly, serve joyfully, and lead courageously. This is what I have been calling an adverbial faith. And somebody at Tracyton today asked me, is adverbial a word? Is it in the dictionary? It's not. Pastors make up words all the time, and so this is just one of them, adverbial faith. Yes, they've had to start somewhere. Thank you, Nadine. Adverbial faith. It's a faith not only about what we do, but how we do. How we love, how we serve, how we lead. Last week we talked about loving boldly, and today we're turning to serving joyfully. You might pause for a moment hearing that phrase, serve joyfully. Because joy and service are not words that often go together. For many of us, when we hear the word service, we immediately think about, well, you tell me, when you hear the word service, what do you think about? I maybe opened up a hive. I'm going to close it. I shouldn't go off script like that. What I'm going to suggest, and tell me if this is right, when we hear of service in the church, it often feels like work. You got it. Exactly. It feels like work. Well, there's military service too. It's service in the context of serving joyfully as an expression of our faith and all of that good stuff. But tell me if this resonates. When we think of service, we can think of it as responsibilities, it's commitments, it's schedules, it's volunteer sign-up sheets. So we know something about those. Service can often feel less like a celebration and more like one more thing to do. Which is why the idea of serving joyfully might be surprising to you at first. But there is a particular kind of joy known here at Brownsville in particular, and you likely know about this. It's after one of our potluck Sundays, maybe after a memorial reception, when the meal is over and someone looks at their watch and says, well, I better get on, or I better be starting to go. And that's the signal to everybody to start washing up the dishes. Maybe the tables have to be put away, the chairs have to be stacked and all of that. But it can start to feel like work, and then somebody starts to tell a story. Someone says a funny joke, or somebody reminds us that all words are made up. And all of a sudden, it doesn't feel like work. It's a reminder of the life that we share together as a fellowship and community of Christ. And this is what I think Scripture means when it talks about serving joyfully. We don't have to pretend that every task is fun. We can discover that service is rooted in the fellowship we share and our belonging in God. Psalm 100 says it best, serve the Lord with joy. But notice the psalmist doesn't begin by saying, serve the Lord and be cheerful about it. Cheerful and joy aren't necessarily the same thing. The psalmist begins with a reminder of who God is and who we are. Know that the Lord is God, that God made us, and that we belong to Him. We are God's people, the sheep of His pasture. Friends, this is the foundation of our service. Before we give anything, before we do anything, before we offer hospitality, God has already welcomed us. Before we care for others, God has cared for us first. Joyful service grows out of this deep assurance that we belong to God. And this, I can't overstate how important this is. Because, sure, obligation can fill the slot, or serving out of obligation or a sense of duty can fill the slot. It can keep the program running. It can make us feel useful for a while, but it can't make us whole. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that obligation is a bad thing. There are things we do because they need doing. There are promises that we keep because we said we would keep them. But if a sense of obligation is the only fuel we have for what we do, well, eventually we're going to run out of gas. And service can become resentment. Yeah, we may still be doing the right things, but the life drains out of them. So joy does something different. Joy reconnects our service, the things we do for others, to the love of God. It reminds us that through our acts of mercy and justice, we aren't just simply maintaining an institution. We're not just maintaining this church. We're caring for people. Now, we'll get to the letter in 1 Peter when he starts to talk about gifts and how we serve joyfully through the unique gifts which God has given us. But before that, I want to introduce you to the way that I identify where I'm finding joy and where I'm not. There are a lot of ways to do that, to identify where maybe God is leading you in your life, but I try to keep it fairly simple. And my approach is inspired by the patron saint of tidy closets. Her name is Marie Kondo. If you don't know who this is, you should. Her Netflix TV show called Tidying Up became very popular during COVID, at least it was in my house, when everybody was at home and staring at the clutter that they had accumulated. They had to see it all day, every day. And on her show, she goes in, she helps folks organize, declutter, and her approach to it is very specific. Her philosophy revolves around physically holding each item that's up for debate and asking yourself if it sparks joy. If it does, you keep it. Great. If it doesn't, like the stack of towels that I've had since college, you say, thank you for your service, and you discard them or donate them. Don't worry, those towels got thrown away. Nobody wants to use those anymore. Now, I realize that this methodology of holding or thinking about things and considering whether or not they bring joy, it can't really be applied wholesale to our church's ministries. You or I can't stand in front of a leaking toilet or a budget spreadsheet and say, sorry, this doesn't spark joy, and decide that it's just going to be discarded. But in all seriousness, beneath Mary Kondo's does it spark joy question is something I think we ought to pay attention to. She's asking people to notice what brings them joy and what only creates clutter. She's asking them to pay attention to what they are carrying and why. So I'll ask you that. What is it that you're carrying today and why? Does it help you connect to the love, the grace, the life of God among us? Or is it something you've been carrying for so long you no longer remember what or whom it was for? I would suggest that the answer to these questions are not exactly a secret. In fact, it's essentially the same message that's been shared at every graduation commencement service this past week and for all of time. If we are going to be a people who serve with joy in the context of a graduate commencement, it's if you're going to be a person who lives with joy and has a happy life, however you define that, you have to move beyond just what needs to be done. You have to pay attention to what your skills are, what your gifts are, what your passions are, what your abilities are. What is it that you love to do? Go and do that. Howard Thurman says it like this. Howard Thurman, by the way, was a mentor of Martin Luther King Jr., a very influential theologian, pastor, civil rights leader. And he wrote once, don't ask what the world needs. Does the world need more coders and people working on artificial intelligence? No, but don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive, and then go do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. It's a very different message, again, considering maybe some recent high school graduates, than go to college, find a job, get a job that you can sustain and pay for life. No. Don't ask what the world needs. Don't even ask what career pays the most money. Ask what makes you come alive, and then go do it. Because what this world needs is people who have come alive. Now, hear this carefully. Thurman's not saying that the world's needs don't matter. Far from it. The hungry need food. Children need safety. Immigrants need dignity. And the world needs a reprieve from our endless wars. So how has God made you alive, church? When Peter wrote the letter that we know as 1 Peter, he was writing it to a group of Christians who were trying to live faithfully in a world that did not always understand or welcome them. These were communities that were under pressure, not living in ideal circumstances, who knew what it meant to be stretched thin and misunderstood. Does this sound familiar to anyone? In the midst of that context, the author says, above all, most importantly, show sincere love to one another and serve each other according to the gift that has been given to them. Thanks be to God that joyful service does not mean pretending we have infinite time and strength and ability and energy to do everything. It comes from remembering that God's grace takes many forms, and each one of us, and each person, has received some expression of that grace. Some of us here serve through food. You can look at a room full of people and know what they want to eat, and better than they do, and then make it for them. Some of y'all serve through repair. You see the light bulb being out or the door that squeaks, and you take care of it before it becomes a bigger problem, not drawing any attention to it. Some of you serve through words, writing cards, or making encouraging calls to check in on one another. And then some of you serve by organizing or teaching or praying, singing, playing guitar, holding down the tech booth at last minute. Thanks, Alan. The gifts are many, but church, the grace is one. So this week, I'm inviting you to Marie Kondo your church life, to take an honest inventory of the places where you serve, participate, and connect. And of course, you can also choose to consider this and the other communities that you serve and participate in as well. But think about the ministries or the places where you serve, the places that you are connected. And then ask yourself, does that thing still spark joy with me, in me? Does that thing connect me to the love of God? Does it help me come alive for the sake of someone else? And does it feel like something I want to carry with me into my next chapter? As you ask yourself that question, not right now, but you're going to be thinking about this for the coming week, right? Yeah, exactly. If you find the answer becoming yes, then maybe the invitation is to bless that thing and lean into it more deeply, to serve there with joy and recognize that joy is not an accident, but part of how God may be strengthening you for the sake of the whole body. If you find that answer being no, and you very well may, it doesn't mean that you have failed, that we have failed, or that you're doing something wrong. Maybe it means that God is inviting you to say, thank you, and as gracefully as possible, let that thing go to make room for another person and their gifts to flourish. I also wonder what it could look like for us to ask those questions as an entire church, to ask where is it that we as a community feel most alive. Sometimes serving joyfully helps us to notice where God has been slowly nudging us all along. Friends, the gifts may differ, but the grace is one. Thanks be to God that all have a gift to share. And one final thing, the whole idea of sharing gifts, saying we all have gifts to share, that's not code speak for you all have something that we want or that I want you to give, right? I think the best news of all from that First Peter, everyone's been given a grace, a gift to share. How many people do you know would say they don't have anything to offer? Whether it's because maybe they're thinking solely financially, maybe they're thinking that their body doesn't allow them to serve or to work because of limited mobility, a disability. But no, everybody has a gift to share, and there's some good news in expressing that to a neighbor. Remember of I've told you before of my friend Richard, who I met when Noli and I moved our house in Manette back in 2022. We moved into the house. There was a neighbor living in an RV in the neighbor's driveway next to us, all of 10 feet from our bedroom window. Um, and so I thought what y'all might have thought, said, that is interesting. I'm going to be excited to see how that turns out. Lo and behold, about 2 weeks after moving up, the table saw in the garage, and Richard, who lived in the trailer, came over, and he became one of my closest friends for that season of life. And I offered him friendship simply because nobody else wanted to talk to him, and I actually enjoyed his presence. And he was a retired contractor, and he gave me, out of the generosity of his heart, all of these tools that I still use today in my garage workshop. But the most valuable thing that Richard gave me was that friendship. And, that's just an example of how we might be surprised with the gifts that somebody has. Don't judge a book by its cover, call it however you want to call it. But with each of us having a gift, something to bring to the table is an evidence of God's grace that goes before us and doesn't show preference or bias. And yeah, thanks be to God for that.